On the moon of Orintel, where the stars seem farther than they should be, there is a valley where the wind forgets to blow. Silence lives there not as an absence, but as a presence, soft and watching. At its heart lie the ruins of a temple built not of stone, but of shadowed memory and firelight. The sky above is always hollow, a deep, endless gray that never quite turns black, as if the stars themselves are holding their breath. The air is dry and still, and the only sound is the quiet crackle of a single flame that never dies. Once, long ago, this place was alive with footsteps and soft voices. The Order who walked here had no name that history remembers. They were not Jedi, and they were not Sith. They did not speak of balance or power. They walked in silence, bearing only flame and memory. Each carried a lantern simple, heavy, carved of dark metal, and etched with words only the bearer could read. And inside each lantern burned a quiet flame. It was not fuel that fed it, nor science that explained it. It burned because someone had to remember. The acolytes of Orintel believed that every forgotten soul left behind a whisper, and that whisper could be caught and held in flame. Each night they would gather in the temple courtyard, cloaks drawn tight against the starlight. Wind one by one, they would light their lanterns from the great central flame, whose origin no one had ever claimed. And then they would walk always east, toward the edge of the sky, along paths that now exist only in ash and dust. As they walked, they whispered names, names that were never written, never carved into stone, names lost in war, or silence, or time, names only they remembered. Some of these names were older than the temple, some were never real. It did not matter. The act of remembering was the act of keeping the Force whole. There were rules to the ritual. No one turned back. No one looked behind them, no one spoke louder than the wind, and no lantern could ever be left unlit. It was said that if even one light failed, the memory it held would be lost forever, and something in the night would stir. It happened only once. One night, a young acolyte's flame faltered. Perhaps a breath caught it, perhaps a doubt no one saw. But the light went out, and the wind, which had been still for centuries, moved. It came as a sigh, then a whisper, then a sound like old robes dragging across stone. The stars above dimmed, as if closing their eyes, and the path the acolytes had walked for lifetimes vanished after that night. No more lanterns were lit. The ritual ended. The temple was sealed. The names were no longer spoken, and slowly, gently, Orintel faded. From maps and memory, pilgrims stopped coming. Stories grew quiet. The Order disappeared, as if they had never been. But one flame remains. In the ruins of the temple, beneath the open ceiling where the sky still hangs hollow and grey, a single lantern burns. It rests atop a pedestal that was once used for mourning, chants, untouched by dust or decay. The flame within it flickers softly, though no wind moves around it. Some say the flame remembers, others say it waits. Travelers who stumble upon the ruins few, though they are, report strange things. The sense of being watched, not by a presence, but by a memory, whispers with no source. Lanterns that appear along the path, just for a moment, then vanish, and always, the soft scent of ash and old fire. Some believe the flame cannot be extinguished, because the name it holds was never spoken. Others say it carries the memory of the one who broke the ritual, the final acolyte, who vanished into the silence and became part of the temple itself, a guardian not of secrets, but of sorrow. It is said that when the last true seeker comes not with a question, but with a memory, the flame will change. It will burn not red, but white, and the wind will rise once more, carrying the names of the forgotten across the stars. Until then, the shadows remain, not hostile, not hollow, but full of quiet purpose. If you stand there long enough, at the edge of the broken courtyard where firelight touches old stone, you may begin to hear something. Not voices, exactly, not words, just the rhythm of names you never knew you remembered. Soft, slow, eternal. And so the flame remains untouched, undying, not waiting for power, not guarding knowledge, only remembering what the galaxy chose to forget. Beneath the hollow sky of Orintel, where no birds fly and no wind moves, the stones remember what the stars have forgotten. The moon is pale and quiet now, wrapped in ash-blue mist, but there was a time when the paths here were lit by flame. Not fire for warmth, not fire for war, but flame as memory, flame as burden, flame as promise. The Order who once walked these paths had no name that could be spoken. Not Jedi, not Sith, something older, something simpler. They were called the keepers of one flame, not by themselves, but by those who saw them pass. Hooded figures, silent in their purpose, drifting through darkness with small lanterns glowing like echoes of stars. They did not teach, they did not fight, they remembered. That was all. Their temple stands still, though the galaxy no longer kneels at its threshold. Built from pale stone and layered time, it rises out of the moon's cracked surface like a memory unearthed. Its arches bend like arms in prayer. Its silence breathes like a sleeping world. Here, the ritual of one flame was born, not as law, not as doctrine, but as a kindness, a way to carry what history could not. Each evening, as the last light left the hollow sky, the acolytes would gather beneath the central arch, where a single flame burned without smoke. They would bow, they would listen, and then, one by one, they would dip their lanterns into the flame and walk out into the waiting dark. They walked not to be seen, but to whisper names, not names of heroes or kings, names no one else would ever speak again. A child who never grew, a wanderer who died alone, a voice that once sang and was lost beneath war. The keepers carried these names like embers in glass, walking until even the stars turned their faces away. They believed, softly, sacredly, that to remember was to hold back the dark, and so they walked, each night, in silence. When the last flame died, they would return, all but one. The final keeper always stayed behind, alone in the dark, until morning came. That was the burden of the last light, to see what the night became when no memory remained. Some said it was a rite of passage, others believed it was penance. But among the oldest scripts carved into the temple walls, there is one line etched, deeper than the rest: only when the last flame fades, shall the true light be seen. Now, the paths are empty, the names forgotten, the stars indifferent, but something remains. Beneath the temple's cracked dome, among the rubble and vines, there is still a lantern burning. No hand feeds it, no wind touches it, and yet it glows, faint, golden, steady. Travelers who find it feel no fear, only weight, the weight of time, of sorrow, of things left unsaid. They speak of a hush that settles over the skin, a sense that someone is near, not trapped, but waiting, not lost, but listening. The walls whisper old breath, symbols carved in silver spiral toward the lantern's base, to warn to read, yet still warm to the touch. A line of soot marks the floor, tracing the path of that final walk. Some believe the last keeper never returned, that they still walk the dark, name by name, step by step, under a sky that never ends. Others say the flame itself remembers, and that within its heart is every whisper, every vow, every forgotten soul. When moonlight filters through the broken arch, it catches the lantern's glass, and for a moment, it seems as though the flame grows, not brighter, just more certain, as though it knows it is not alone. The ritual of one flame was never about the past. It was about the unseen, about the stories no one recorded, the lives that flickered without audience, the quiet truth that every light, no matter how small, carries something sacred, something worth walking for. And though the temple lies in ruin, though the stars above have turned their gaze elsewhere, the ritual continues, not in grand ceremony, not in memory, but in the stubborn glow of that one remaining flame. It burns not for the galaxy, but for the one who will find it, for the traveler who still believes that silence can be holy, that light can be gentle, and that even the forgotten deserve to be named. So if you ever come to Orenthal, tread softly, speak kindly, and when you see the lantern, do not touch it. Simply sit, breathe, listen, and remember, because the night does not forget, and neither does the flame. There is a kind of silence that holds memory like breath, held in the lungs, a silence not of absence, but of waiting. And within that silence, beneath a sky that no longer knows the names of its stars, a hand rises, weathered by wind, by time, by ash, the hand of one who remembers, though their voice has long since been lost. In that trembling palm rests a lantern, not made of glass, nor wire, but of bronze, softened by age, with etchings like whispers, curling, secret shapes that mean nothing to those who only look with eyes. It glows not brightly, but steadily, like something remembering how to burn, and in the dim firelight, a reflection flickers, not of the world, but of the soul that carries it. The fog drifts like breath between the stones. All around is the hollow ruin of Orenthal, the moon of long pilgrimages and longer silences. This is where the keepers once walked, cloaked in smoke and stillness, bearing flame not to see, but to remember. They were not Jedi, they were not Sith. They were something else, an order that bound themselves not to war or peace, but to memory. Their law was silence. Their burden was light. Each lantern they carried held a name that had been erased, a name once spoken into the flame at dusk, then carried through the night, until the stars themselves could no longer hear. The keepers walked alone, always west, always into the deepest part of the dark, speaking the names of the forgotten, until their own voices gave out, not loudly, never loudly. A whisper was all the name could bear, or it would vanish again. Some say the stars listened, others say the void did. But when the final lantern dimmed, and the last whisper fell into the dust, something in the dark would stir, a presence, a shadow, a listening, and so the ritual became known, not taught, only felt. The walking of the flame. Only one name was spoken per journey. One name, one lantern, one keeper, no more. And when they returned, if they returned, the lantern was sealed. The flame remained within. No one asked whose memory it held. That was not their way. What mattered was only that the memory was carried, that it would not fall to silence again. Now, the halls are still. The great stone corridors of Orenthal have collapsed inward, like ribs around a breath that was never exhaled. Moss has crept over the walls, dust has filled the speaking chambers. The wind, once forbidden here, now passes through freely, touching what was once sacred. But one lantern remains, set on a pedestal of cracked obsidian, beneath a ceiling carved with names. No longer understood, it glows, not brightly, not warmly, but truly. It glows as if it still remembers the hand that carried it, and the voice that spoke into it, and the name it was sworn to guard. Some who have come here, wandering seekers and dreamers, have tried to lift it, but it will not move. Others have tried to open it, but it will not open. A few have wept in its presence, though they do not know why. And once, long ago, a child touched it and saw the stars blink. When asked what they had felt, the child said, "It is waiting." There are those who believe the last flame holds not one memory, but all of them, that the keepers who vanished into the dark did not die, but entered the lantern itself. Their souls kindled into a single eternal ember, that when the time comes, the time no one remembers how to name, the lantern will open, and the night will listen again. But until then, it waits. In silence, in fog, in the soft light that dances across the stone like breath made visible. And though its flame does not flicker, though it burns as steadily as it did in the beginning, the air around it feels heavy, not with fear, not with power, but with sorrow. A sorrow that is not sadness, but the weight of memory itself, of all that was loved, and lost, and carried. So if you ever find yourself on Orenthal, and the fog moves aside just long enough for you to see the stone gate, step gently, do not speak. Walk until the stars begin to fade. And if your heart aches in a way you cannot explain, if your hand reaches without knowing why, you may find yourself before the flame. Look into it, and it may show you a name, one not yours, one you have never heard. But in that moment, it will become yours to carry. And so the flame endures, quiet, patient, eternal.